Hello and welcome to Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Colred. Thank you for joining me. So it is February, and that means Valentine's Day is around the corner. As is tradition in Raid, Plarium is launching a Valentine's Day fusion that has a duo as well. Kind of a romantic couple kind of theme. They do this every year. Some of these duos can be incredibly powerful. For instance, the first one was Rotos as the fusion and Siphi as the duo. So Rotos and Siphi to this day are one of the best duos in the entire game. So in today's video, I'm going to walk you through both champions in this duo and hopefully give you enough information for you to decide whether or not the fusion champion is worth going. I hope you're ready for it. Let's get started. Just a reminder, I live stream every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That is my Takeover Tuesday live stream where I give away free account takeovers to members of my Discord community. So if you are interested in a free takeover of your account or you just like watching takeover content, come join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and consider joining our Discord community. Thanks so much. Now let's get back to the video. Okay, so here she is, Wight Queen Ankora. This is the fusion champion for February. It will start on February 8th, so that is just 3 days from now. She is a legendary support champion, magic affinity in the Knights Revenant faction. So here are her skills. Now, just a quick note right at the top, all 4 of Queen Ankora's skills synergize with King Narses. This isn't always the case. Sometimes it's just 1 skill, sometimes it's 2, sometimes 3. In this case, it's all 4. You don't see that too often. The aura obviously doesn't interact, but otherwise everything has synergy with King Narses. So King Narses is a Void legendary champion. Let me show you him real quickly. There he is. And you can see he is a Void legendary also in the Knights Revenant faction. So the likelihood of getting King Narses is relatively low. And as a result, we want to judge Queen Ankora on 2 different criteria. One being, how good is she just by herself? And then the second being, how good would she be if you also had King Narses? It is possible that some of you, even free-to-play players, will pull King Narses at some point along the line. And this is going to be your best chance to get Queen Ankora. So if you like the duo, I would recommend at least considering going for this fusion if you think you can complete her. That's without even examining the skill. So again, you're going to have to look at the champions and judge for yourself. But like I said, if you like King Narses and you want to play him and they are fairly powerful together, then that's a consideration. But for the first look, let's just consider the skills without the synergies. I'm just going to read the parts of the skills that don't include the duo. Okay, so the A1 is Necrobolt. It attacks 1 enemy and has a 30% chance, which books to a 50% chance, of decreasing the cooldown of a random ally skills by 2 turns. I'm sorry, a random ally's skill, just 1 skill, except this champion. So she can't cool down her own skill. Now, 50% chance to decrease the cooldown of a random ally's skill is a pretty powerful A1. When you think about some of the A1s that are out there, this effect is much more powerful than a lot of effects that you see on A1s. Of course, it's a 50% chance, so it is random, and you also don't know the ally that you're going to land on, unless, say, you're running in a duo. So this is an interesting skill, and we'll talk more about this as we look at the rest of her kit. Now, in addition, it says if the cooldown on a skill is fully reset, it also heals that ally by 10% of this champion's max HP. Now, that's likely to happen a fair amount of the time, so you're going to get some sustain out of this A. Okay, now the Shield of Amaria. This looks like it books down to a 3-turn cooldown. It removes all debuffs from all allies and then places a shield buff on them equal to 25% of this champion's max HP for 2 turns. Now, that's pretty good. It is a full AoE cleanse plus a shield on a 3-turn cooldown. This is a nice skill. It looks like it also fills the turn meter of all allies by 10%. I don't think that last piece is attached to Wight King Narses, but we'll have to see for sure when the champions are launched. So AoE cleanse, pretty decent shield, 25%. It's not a huge shield, but it's not bad. And then turn meter fill of 10%. All right, now let's look at the A3, Rise My Love. This book's down to a 3-turn cooldown. So this revives a dead ally with 50% HP and 75% turn meter, resets the cooldowns of the revived ally's skills. It also says after the revival, decreases the turn meter of all enemies by 10%. That would make sense again as something that is not a synergy with the duo. That should just happen. So on the A2, you get turn meter fill by 10%, and on the revive, the A3, you get a decrease of turn meters of all enemies by 10%. Now, decreasing enemies' turn meter takes accuracy, and this is literally the only thing in the entire kit that requires accuracy. So that is something to consider if you do get her and you start to build her, or you're previewing how likely are you to build her with accuracy. In this particular case, I don't know that it's likely because she's such a good support, or her kit is basically a buff champion, a buff reviver, cleanser. So this is kind of interesting though. It's not that common to have a cleanse and a revive on the same champion. Obviously, we have Pythion who does that as well. This is a single target revive instead of an AoE revive though. So, and no block debuffs buff. So Pythion's kit feels a little bit stronger in that regard. But I will say the really interesting part of this revive is that it's 50% HP and 75% turn meter. That's a lot of turn meter on a revive. And it also resets the cooldowns of the revived allies' skills. So this is similar to Godseeker Aniri's revive. Except Godseeker Aniri's revive is 50% HP and 50% turn meter. It resets the cooldown of the revived allies' skills, but it's on a 4-turn cooldown. So this is an improved version of Godseeker Aniri's active revive. Obviously, Godseeker Aniri also has their passive revive, right? So those two can work really well together. Ankora doesn't have that additional revive, but this is a stronger version of Godseeker Aniri's active revive. Now, if we look at Queen Consort, which is the passive, it looks like this book's down to a 0-turn cooldown. So it starts at 3 turns. Each book should remove a cooldown, meaning once it's fully booked, it's available multiple times per turn. It's not even, there's no cooldown whatsoever. Whenever an enemy tries to place, it looks like every single hard CC, sleep, stun, provoke, freeze, also the fear and true fear. So any CC, except for slow. On the ally with the highest crit damage, so it has to be your nuker basically. It transfers those debuffs to this champion instead. This is going to prevent your nuker from being locked down. I like that idea. Fills the turn meter of this champion by 50% if this champion misses their turn due to one of these debuffs. Now, I don't know if these debuffs means just any of those debuffs or if it means debuffs that were transferred. So we'll have to figure out how that mechanic works exactly in game. I suspect it's just any of those debuffs. So even if she gets hit with a stun, say, then, she has a 50% chance to fill her turn meter. No, not 50% chance, 100% chance of filling her turn meter by 50%. So that's nice. It means even though she loses a turn, she's going to get half of a turn back. So she's really only losing half a turn. In addition, finally, we have an aura that increases speed in all battles by 19%. So without any of the synergies, we have some interesting abilities. I like the A1. I think it allows for some really interesting theory crafting. I think as time progresses, people will find ways to use Ankora as solutions to various challenges in the game that are very creative. Not the challenges, but the solutions are creative. So yeah, I mean, just this A1 alone makes her a really interesting duo champion, right? That's a pretty cool A1. In addition, the A2, I think, is solid. It's a cleanse, shield, and turn meter fill. And then I think the revive is also really good and also going to add to that potential for creative problem solving in terms of maybe duos or team compositions. So I do like the revive as well. Now, the passive is going to be great specifically in a very few PvE fights, but more specifically in PvP. And I think she is a champion that could be used in PvE and in PvP. Probably early. If you're relatively early in the game, she could be a good clan boss champion, probably on a killable composition, not an unkillable composition, because your A1 is going to throw off your unkillable buffs periodically. But in a killable composition, she might be very valuable. Her all-around versatility seems relatively high. Not a lot of sustain here. Although, to be fair, the shield is also a form of sustain. And so that's not bad with the little heal that you might get on the A1 from time to time. But all in all, a pretty good defensive champion that's going to enable your team to not be locked down very easily, especially your nuker. So she might work really well in a high resist build because she is primarily a buffer. She doesn't have any debuffs. You don't have to worry about accuracy. So instead of putting those points into accuracy the way you would with the debuffer, shift them over to resist. Get her resist relatively high, 300, 400, 500 if you can. And then you're always going to have that reviver available and that cleanser available. And that's really going to help in a lot of different places. Okay, now let's look at the skills and how they change in terms of adding the duo. So the A1 says that if Wight King Narses is on the same team and has any active skills on cooldown, decreases the cooldown of one of their skills by 2 turns. So basically, the A1 will always target Wight King Narses. If he doesn't have any skills on cooldown, then it'll just target somebody else. So it won't waste the ally skill reduction on him if he can't have the cooldown reduction applied, which really makes it interesting when you're thinking about trios now. You could potentially use these 2 champions with a 3rd champion and then be guaranteed that the 3rd champion will always have their cooldowns reduced. Now, obviously, it's still going to be a 50% chance. Maybe not. It might be a 100% chance. I don't know exactly how this reads. It says if Wight King Narses is on the same team and has any active skills on cooldown, decreases the cooldown of one of their skills by 2 turns. So I don't know if it's just saying it's not random anymore and it will always be Wight King Narses, or if it's saying it's now a 100% chance for Wight King Narses. So if you know the answer to that question, please put it in the comments below so we can spread that around. If it's a 100% chance, then this becomes a really, really interesting trio. Yeah, I like that idea, but we'll have to check. We'll have to see how that actually plays out. Okay, now for the shield skill, the cleanse, and the shield skill, the A2, if Wight King Narses is on the same team, also places a 25% strengthen buff on all allies for 2 turns. So we now have a strengthen buff added to the team. That's nice. That makes the shield even stronger. That is more sustain, more tankiness. I like that quite a bit. That's going to be a powerful addition. Now, on the A3, it says if the target of the revive is Wight King Narses, revives him with 75% HP and 100% turn meter instead. We've seen this before, so basically he's going to get an opportunity to go next. After the revival, decreases the turn meter of all enemies by 10%. And that's really important because if you've ever used the Wukong, if you've ever used Wukong and you've seen his revive skill, he comes back with 100% turn meter, but he doesn't always go next because sometimes the enemies on the other team have more turn meter than 100%. So this is actually going to roll everybody back 10%, giving Wight King Narses a more likely chance of going next. And actually, I'm sorry, it's 20% if it's the Wight King who is revived, and the effect cannot be resisted, removing the need for accuracy. So this is even stronger with the Wight King on the team, and 20%, it makes it even more likely that the Wight King will go next after a revive. Now, finally, when we get down to the passive, it says at the start of this champion's turn, removes any of those CC debuffs from this champion if Wight King Narses is on the same team. So those debuffs get pulled onto the queen and then get wiped out if the king is also on the same team. So rather than getting 50% turn meter fill, it looks like you just get your normal turn. So that's better, right? She doesn't lose a turn, basically, with Wight King Narses. So I would say that she gets significantly stronger with Wight King Narses. I really like the strengthen. I like the 100% turn meter fill on Wight King Narses if he revives, but obviously you may not be reviving him. You may be reviving the other champion. I really like the A1 potentially. I think this becomes a really interesting trio that could solve a lot of PvE problems and obviously could be really strong in PvP as well. All right, now let's go take a look at Wight King Narses. Okay, so there he is. I just wanted to give you a chance to actually see his character model. He looks pretty cool. I like this duo. I like the artwork in general. Seems pretty solid. We'll have to see what they look like in game. He is an HP-based champion. We'll have to see how that plays out, but I expect him to have a relatively large HP pool. He is a Void Legendary, so we could be looking at an HP pool of 22 to maybe 24,000 HP, maybe even a little bit higher if they get crazy with it. We'll have to see what happens. So let's go ahead and check out his skills, but obviously, again, we need to consider his skills without the Wight Queen and then with the Wight Queen. In this case, I will just do them in order as I go. So Corruption Scepter is his A1, attacks one enemy, and looks like it has a 50% chance when booked of randomly increasing the cooldown of one of the target's skills by 2 turns. So this is the flip side of the Wight Queen's skill, right? She reduces cooldowns and the Wight King increases cooldown. So it's kind of cool. I think it's less powerful than hers in some ways, but could be very useful in PvP, could be useful in wave content, not as useful in boss fights. This effect cannot be resisted if Wight Queen Ankora is on the same team. That's really nice. So it basically turns a pretty good skill into an irresistible skill, which means it removes the need for accuracy. Just like he does for her, he returns the favor. Okay, let's look at the A2, Desecration Blast. This is on a 3-turn cooldown when booked. Attacks all enemies, will ignore the target's defense, places an extra hit on targets under shield or strengthened buffs. Now, this is incredibly important because right now we have bolster sets and shield sets all over the arena. We also have a lot of champions with strengthened buffs. So this is not only going to ignore the target's defense, it's going to place a second hit. This isn't ignoring the shield. This isn't ignoring the strengthened buff. This is placing a second hit. We've had a lot of champions in recent months be released that ignore shields or strengthens or sometimes even like block damage buffs or stone skin buffs. But this is actually going to place a second hit. And that's really interesting because that means 100% more damage on top of the hit instead of ignoring those abilities. Kind of interesting. We'll have to see how that plays out. Damage inflicted by the skill cannot be decreased by enemy passives or masteries. That's interesting. Except by the passive skills of bosses, obviously. Damage increased by the skill cannot be increased by either this champion's masteries or ally passive skills, except when attacking bosses. Okay. Let me know in the comments below if you know whether or not the damage can be increased by Helm Smasher Mastery. So the Helm Smasher Mastery has a 50% chance of ignoring, 50% defense, I think it is. So can that still activate? Can that still activate when this skill is up? We have some other champions who have this exact wording in their skills, so maybe somebody knows the answer to that question. I'm curious myself. I don't know the answer. But still, it looks like it's going to be a hard-hitting skill. We'll have to see what the multipliers are and what his HP pool is in order to know exactly how hard it's going to hit. But it looks like he's going to be a hard-hitting HP-based champion, which will be nice. There aren't that many of them in the game. Okay, the A3 is Spirits Claim You, which books down to a 4-turn cooldown. Attacks one enemy 2 times, increases the damage inflicted with a skill by 10% for each buff on the target, stacks up to 50%. And by an additional 10% for each buff on this champion, stacks up to an additional 50%. So you can get 100% extra damage if the target has 5 buffs and if you have 5 buffs. That's a lot of buffs, and most times that won't happen, but potentially you could easily get maybe 50% total increased damage. If this attack kills a target under 3 or more buffs, places a block revive debuff. Now that's interesting because placing a block revive debuff typically takes accuracy. Because it's a place and it's after the kill, it may not, it can't weak hit anyway, he's Void Affinity, so I guess that doesn't matter. But this will be interesting to see whether or not that requires accuracy. Also grants an extra turn if this attack kills an enemy when Wight Queen Ankora is on the same team. So that's a really nice improvement to the skill. This basically turns him into a Rotos right? Where you could potentially nuke out a single target and then get another skill and hit again. But you would probably open up with this skill if you have Wight Queen Ankora, right? You would lead with this skill, hopefully between the ignore defense and strengthen and shields and all of that. Sorry, the increased damage. There's no ignore defense. The ignore defense is on the A2. So increased damage and the passive, I guess. The passive also increases damage. You could potentially nuke out one target here, maybe the enemy nuker, and then work your way into the A2 where you can nuke the whole team. Okay, now we have this passive. This champion will receive 50% less damage when attacked by enemies, including bosses and their minions, out of their active turn. So anytime a extra attack is triggered, and that could be an ally attack, that could be a counter attack, or that could be, you know, an attack triggered off of a passive, this champion will receive 50% of the damage. That's it. He's an HP-based champion. He may be relatively survivable. I expect him to have low defense because he looks like a damage dealer, but he's going to have a nice HP pool. If Wight Queen Ankora is on the same team, this champion will receive no damage when attacked by enemies out of their turn. He'll basically be immune to counterattack and ally attack damage. That's kind of crazy. This effect does not apply to bosses and their minions. Okay, so in PvE, there's no particular benefit to having the duo in this passive, at least for the passive. This champion skills will also ignore shield and strengthen buffs. That seems like it's all the time. So he just ignores shield and strengthen buffs all the time, and he puts an extra hit on them on his A2. So this guy looks like he could hit really hard. He's basically a nuker, so he's an HP-based nuker. Looks like he could have some value in PvE, especially if you can build a cool trio around this duo, right? Add one additional champion into this mix, and you could find some really interesting ways to use the Wight Queens A1, or maybe just use them as a duo even. They're going to be very survivable. He's an HP-based champion. She's a reviver, right? And a cleanser. So putting the two together could be very powerful. His aura increases ally HP in all battles by 33%. Okay, so he looks fantastic. We'll have to see his multipliers to really know. If he hits like a wet noodle, it's not going to matter. Then we don't really care. But he could still provide extra utility to the Wight Queen and make for an interesting duo or trio, or maybe even just a core to a full 5 champion team composition. I think they're going to be very strong in arena together. Yeah, and I definitely think that the power is going to be shifted when they are together. So I do think that Wight Queen Ankora is probably worth going for in the fusion if you have the resources. If she is your first fusion, I always like to do this for free-to-play players. If you're a free-to-play player and you say, if this could be my first fusion, should I go for her? I think you could get some value out of her. Especially if you don't have a cleanse already, she provides some sustain. She's got a revive. She's going to help your nuker out in arena. You know, she's got that A1. She's not a fantastic clan boss champion, but she could be good in the relatively early to mid game in terms of clan boss. And then I think she's going to have value in a lot of places. It's always nice to have more champions with speed auras in all battles. So that 19% will play for you as well if you don't have other champions that you like in that spot. Wight King Narses is going to be fantastic in arena. I think the duo is going to be even more powerful in arena. And so you're going to want to have both of them. So if you are interested in Wight King Narses and you're a spender who pulls a lot of void shards, then you're definitely going to want to go for Wight Queen Ankora because she is going to empower him and make him even better. And he is absolutely going to make her stronger as well. So as a duo, I would say maybe not on par with Siphi and Rotos, but maybe not far behind. They could be close to that level, and they may be slightly better in certain PvE content. So we're going to have to see. Again, it's going to be dependent upon the Wight King's damage levels and sort of how some of these skills actually work, because I'm just sort of interpreting what I think is likely to happen, but I may be wrong about some of these these oddly worded, like little components, little additional conditional components of these skills. All right, so that is it, I think. Let me know in the comments below if you will be going for the Wight Queen or if you're just gonna let her go. And then what about the Wight King? What do you think about him? Is he gonna be fantastic or is he gonna be kind of a mid-tier Wight Legendary? I don't know. And also, if you have the answer to any of those questions about those skills, please put those in the comments as well. All right, thanks so much for hanging out. I have been Colred, and I will see you in another video soon.